I thought the ocean took her away from me forever, but I never realized it was bringing her back until the day she stood in front of me again. My name is Olivia Carter, and for the past several years, I have built a quiet life beside the waves of a small coastal town in Maine. Every morning, I open my little cafe near the shoreline, listened to the sound of the ocean, prepared coffee for familiar faces, and watched visitors come and go with stories of their own. It was a simple life, and I convinced myself that simple was enough. After all, some people spend years searching for peace, and I had finally found mine. Or, at least, that was what I believed. Then Samantha Reed came back. I saw her standing outside my cafe on a cloudy afternoon, holding the same camera she had carried years ago, with the same thoughtful expression that I remembered too well. For a moment, everything around me became quiet. The waves continued moving behind her. The wind moved through the streets, but all I could see was the person I thought I had left in the past. Samantha had been the person who once made ordinary days feel unforgettable. She was the woman who could find beauty in a quiet beach, a forgotten lighthouse, or a simple moment of sunlight reflecting on the water. She was also the person who disappeared from my life, without giving me the answers I wanted. Years ago, she left this town to follow her photography dreams. I told myself I understood. I told myself that people sometimes choose different paths. But deep down, I carried questions I never asked. Why did she leave without looking back? Did she ever think about me? Did the memories we shared mean anything to her? When Samantha stepped inside my cafe that afternoon, she smiled softly and said, "It has been a long time, Olivia." Those simple words carried years of emotions I had never allowed myself to feel. I wanted to ask everything at once. I wanted to understand the distance that had grown between us. But instead, I simply said, "Welcome home." I was surprised by my own words because I was not sure if I meant the town, the cafe, or something much deeper. Over the next few days, Samantha became part of my familiar routine again. She visited the cafe in the mornings, sat near the window, and shared stories from the places she had photographed. She talked about oceans she had seen, cities she had explored, and people she had met along the way. I listened carefully, even when part of me wondered why I was still interested after all these years. Maybe because some connections do not disappear completely. Maybe they simply wait beneath the surface until the right moment arrives. I thought I had moved on from Samantha. I thought the waves had carried our story away. But as I watched her smile across the cafe, I realized something I was not ready to admit. The past was not finished with us yet. After all these years, I thought I had forgotten Samantha Reed, but I was wrong. I had only learned how to live with the space she left behind. When Samantha returned to my coastal town, I expected old memories to come back. What I did not expect was how quickly those memories would feel alive again. Every morning, when she walked into my cafe and sat near the window facing the ocean, it felt like time had folded in on itself. The same woman who once filled my days with unexpected adventures was suddenly sitting across from me again, telling stories about places I had only seen in photographs. But this time, there was something different about her. Years ago, Samantha was always moving forward, always searching for the next place to visit and the next story to capture. Now, she seemed more thoughtful, more present, almost as if the years away had taught her something she never understood before. One morning, while I was preparing coffee behind the counter, Samantha noticed an old photograph hanging on the wall. It was a picture of the shoreline taken years ago, before the cafe had changed into the place it was today. She smiled when she saw it. "You kept this?" she asked. I looked at the photograph and nodded. "Some things are worth keeping." Samantha looked at me for a moment, and I wondered if she understood that my answer meant more than a simple picture. There were memories attached to that photograph. Conversations, laughter, moments when we believed the future was something we would discover together. But life had taken us in different directions. I had stayed by the ocean, while Samantha followed the horizon. As the days passed, we started finding our old rhythm again. We walked along the beach after closing the cafe. We talked about books, photography, and the small details of life that most people ignored. Samantha still noticed things I never saw. She would stop to photograph a seashell resting in the sand or the way sunlight reflected on the water. "You always look for stories everywhere," I told her one evening. She smiled. "Maybe, because every place has something to say." I wanted to ask if she believed the same was true for people. I wanted to know if she thought our story still had something left to say. But I stayed quiet. Some questions are difficult because the answer matters too much. One afternoon, Samantha showed me a collection of photographs from her travels. As I looked through them, I noticed something surprising. Many of the images captured moments of connection. People sitting together. Families sharing simple experiences. Strangers finding beauty in ordinary places. "Your photographs changed," I said. Samantha looked curious.
How?
I smiled. "They feel less like you are searching for places, and more like you are searching for people." She became quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Maybe I spent years looking everywhere except where I should have looked." Her words stayed with me long after she left. I wondered if Samantha was talking about photography, or something much more personal. Maybe we both spent years searching for something we had already found once. The ocean had carried her away from my life, but now she was standing beside me again. And for the first time, I started wondering if her return was not just a coincidence. Maybe some stories are not meant to end. Maybe they are simply waiting for the right moment to begin again. I used to believe that some memories were meant to stay in the past, but Samantha reminded me that unfinished stories have a way of finding their way back. After Samantha returned to town, our days slowly became filled with moments that felt familiar and completely new at the same time. We were not the same people we had been years ago. I was no longer the woman who waited for life to change while standing still. Samantha was no longer the woman who believed leaving was the only way to find herself. Yet somehow, the connection between us remained. One afternoon, Samantha asked if I would join her while she photographed the shoreline near an old lighthouse outside town. It was a place we used to visit when we were younger, a place where we would sit for hours and talk about the future. I agreed, even though part of me wondered if I was ready to revisit those memories. The drive there was quiet but comfortable. We talked about simple things like the changes in town and the people we had met over the years. But beneath those conversations were all the things we were not saying. When we reached the lighthouse, Samantha lifted her camera and started taking pictures of the waves. I watched her work and noticed something I had never realized before. She was not just capturing the ocean. She was capturing feelings. Moments that could disappear if no one noticed them. "You still do that," I said. Samantha looked at me. "Do what?" "Find meaning in places everyone else walks past." She smiled softly. "Maybe that is why I came back." Her answer surprised me. I wanted to ask what she meant, but before I could, she changed the subject. That was something Samantha had always done. She would get close to something important, then step away before it became too real. Later that day, while we sat near the water, Samantha finally asked me a question I did not expect. "Did you ever hate me for leaving?" I looked at the ocean before answering. The honest answer was complicated. There were moments when I was hurt. Moments when I wondered why I was not enough for her to stay. But as time passed, I realized the story was not that simple. "I never hated you," I said. "I just wished you had trusted me enough to tell me the truth." Samantha became quiet. The wind moved gently around us, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "I was afraid." I looked at her. "Of what?" Samantha looked toward the waves. "Of choosing a life where I might lose myself. And I was afraid that if I stayed, you would eventually resent me for not becoming the person I thought I needed to be." Her words revealed a part of her I had never seen before. The confident photographer who traveled the world was still someone carrying uncertainty. Someone who had spent years trying to prove she could stand alone. That evening, as we walked back toward town, I realized something had changed. The distance between us was still there. The years apart could not disappear overnight. But for the first time, we were finally talking about the things that had created that distance. And maybe understanding where the waves came from was the first step toward learning how to cross them. I thought understanding Samantha's reasons for leaving would make the past easier to accept, but I discovered something unexpected. Knowing the truth did not erase the years we spent apart. It simply helped me see the person behind the decision. For so long, I had looked at Samantha's departure as a moment when she chose the world over me. But now I began to understand that she was also struggling with her own fears, her own dreams, and her own questions about who she wanted to become. After that day near the lighthouse, something between us became more honest. We still had moments of silence, but they felt different. They were no longer filled with unanswered questions. They were moments where we both understood that some feelings needed time before they could be fully expressed. Samantha started spending more time at my cafe. She helped me create a small corner near the window where local artists could display their work. It reminded me of the way she always saw possibilities in ordinary places. "You are turning this cafe into something bigger than coffee," she said one morning while arranging photographs on the wall. I smiled. "And you are turning every wall into a story." She laughed softly, and for a moment, everything felt natural again. But I knew there was still something we needed to face. The past between us had not disappeared simply because we finally talked about it. One evening, after closing the cafe, we walked along the beach. As the sun slowly disappeared beyond the horizon, the waves moved gently toward the shore, creating the same sound I had heard every day for years. Samantha looked at the ocean and said, "I used to think leaving would make everything easier." I looked at her. "Did it?" She shook her head.
No.
"Because distance does not remove feelings. It only makes you realize what you were trying to avoid." Her honesty touched me because I knew exactly what she meant. I had spent years avoiding my own feelings too. I created a comfortable life because it was easier than admitting I still wondered about her. "I thought you left because you did not care," I finally said. Samantha looked at me with sadness in her eyes. "I left because I cared so much that I was afraid of disappointing you." That sentence changed something inside me. For years, I had imagined a completely different story. I imagined Samantha leaving because I was not important enough. But maybe the truth was that we both misunderstood each other. Maybe we both carried fears that kept us from saying what mattered most. We sat together on the sand, watching the waves move under the evening sky. There was no dramatic moment where everything was suddenly perfect.
Real life was not that simple.
But there was something new between us. Understanding. The kind that comes when two people stop protecting themselves long enough to truly listen. When I returned home that night, I realized the ocean had never been the thing separating us. The real distance had always been the words we were too afraid to say. And now, for the first time in years, those words were finally reaching the shore. After Samantha finally told me the truth, I thought the hardest part was behind us. I believed that understanding why she left would be enough to heal the years we spent apart. But I soon learned that knowing the reason was only the beginning. Some distances are created by choices, but some remain because two people still have to decide what they truly want. Samantha and I had found our way back to honest conversations, but we were still learning how to exist in the present instead of being trapped by the past. One morning, Samantha arrived at my cafe carrying a small collection of photographs. She placed them carefully on the counter and asked me what I thought. As I looked through each image, I noticed something familiar. Every photograph captured moments of connection. A couple sharing coffee near the ocean. A family walking together along the beach. Friends laughing under the evening sky. These were not just pictures of places. They were pictures of people choosing to be present with each other. "Your work feels different now," I told her. Samantha smiled. "I think I see things differently now." I looked at her and wondered if she realized how much she had changed. The woman who once believed she had to keep moving was beginning to understand the value of staying. Later that week, Samantha helped me prepare for a small community event at the cafe. We decorated the walls with local artwork and displayed some of her photographs. Watching her interact with people in town made me realize something. Samantha had always been someone who brought people together. She just never believed she deserved that same connection for herself. That evening, after everyone left, we sat near the water and talked about the future. It was a conversation I had been both hoping for and avoiding. "What happens now?" I asked. Samantha looked at the ocean for a long moment before answering. I do not know yet. Her honesty surprised me, but it also felt right. We were not two people trying to recreate the past. We were two people trying to understand what was possible now. I spent years thinking I had to choose between my dreams and the people I cared about, Samantha said. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe the right people do not ask you to give up who you are. I smiled because those words meant more than she knew. I had spent years believing that loving someone meant accepting the possibility of losing them. But Samantha was teaching me something different. Love could also mean encouraging someone to grow. Over the next few weeks, we continued building a new routine together. Morning coffee, walks by the shoreline, conversations that lasted longer than planned. It was not the same as before. It was better because it was built on honesty instead of assumptions. Still, I could sense that something was coming. Samantha had returned with a purpose, but she had not told me everything about her plans. And deep down, I was afraid of what that might mean. Because after finding our way back to each other, I did not know if I was ready to face another goodbye. I thought I was prepared for anything Samantha might tell me, but I was not prepared for the moment when she finally shared her plans for the future. After everything we had rebuilt, after finally understanding the reasons behind our years apart, the possibility of another distance between us felt heavier than before. One evening, Samantha came to the cafe after closing. The ocean was calm, and the soft sound of waves filled the quiet space around us. I knew from the expression on her face that there was something she wanted to say. I received an opportunity, she said. I looked at her carefully. A photography project? She nodded. It was an incredible opportunity. A year-long project documenting coastal communities across the country. It was the kind of work Samantha had dreamed about since she was young. I should have been nothing but happy for her. And I was. But there was another feeling I could not ignore.
Fear.
I was afraid of losing the person I had only just found again. Samantha noticed my silence. Olivia, I do not want you to think I am leaving because I do not care. I looked at her and immediately understood why she was saying that. The past had created a wound between us that both of us were still learning to understand. I know, I said quietly, but I am still scared. Saying those words out loud felt strange. For years, I had been the person who stayed strong for everyone else. I had learned how to handle disappointment without showing how much it affected me. But Samantha had changed something in me. She made me believe that honesty was better than pretending I had no fears. Samantha reached for my hand, and for a moment, we simply sat there listening to the ocean. Do you remember what you told me at the lighthouse? She asked. I smiled slightly. That distance does not remove feelings. She nodded. I have been thinking about that ever since. She explained that this opportunity was different from before. Years ago, she left because she was running away from difficult choices. This time, she wanted to follow a dream while being honest about what mattered to her. She did not want to disappear. She did not want to create another unanswered goodbye. I want a life where I can be myself, Samantha said. And I want the people I love to be part of that life. Her words stayed with me because I realized something important. The fear I felt was not because I doubted Samantha. It was because I cared. And caring always comes with the possibility of uncertainty. Over the next few days, we talked about what the future could look like. We discussed how we could support each other without asking either person to give up their dreams. It was not a simple conversation. Real life rarely gives simple answers. But for the first time, we were facing uncertainty together instead of letting it separate us. On the morning Samantha left for her project, we stood near the shoreline where so many memories had begun. She looked at the ocean and smiled. The waves always come back, she said. I looked at her and realized that maybe some connections are not measured by how close two people stand. Maybe they are measured by whether they can find their way back after the distance between them grows. After Samantha left for her photography project, I thought the hardest part would be missing her presence. I thought the quiet mornings at the cafe would feel empty, and I thought every familiar place would remind me of what was gone. But something unexpected happened. Instead of feeling like I was losing Samantha again, I felt like I was discovering a new part of myself. For the first time in years, I was learning how to stand beside someone without losing who I was. Before Samantha returned, I had built my entire life around being dependable. I took care of my cafe, my customers, and the people who needed me. I was proud of that, but I never stopped to ask what I wanted. Samantha's absence gave me time to think about that question. What kind of life did I want to create? What dreams had I ignored because I thought it was too late to chase them? I started making changes at the cafe. I created a small community space where local artists could share their work. I invited people to tell their stories through photographs, paintings, and writing. Every time someone shared something personal in that space, I thought about Samantha and the way she always believed ordinary moments mattered. While I was creating a new routine, Samantha was traveling from one coastal town to another. She sent me photographs and messages about the people she met. She told me about fishermen who had spent their entire lives near the ocean, families who built traditions around the shoreline, and small communities that carried stories through generations. But the most surprising thing was how Samantha's messages changed. Before, she would send pictures without explaining much. Now, she shared her thoughts. She told me when she felt uncertain. She admitted when she missed home. She allowed me to see the parts of herself she once kept hidden. One evening, while we were talking on the phone, Samantha said something that stayed with me. I used to think freedom meant never needing anyone. I smiled. And now? She paused before answering. Now I think freedom means choosing what matters to you. I looked out at the ocean from my apartment window and realized how much we had both changed. Years ago, Samantha believed leaving was the only way to grow. I believed staying was the only way to feel safe. But maybe both of us were wrong. Growth did not always require distance. Safety did not always require staying still. Sometimes the biggest changes happen when you allow yourself to be open to something new. As the months passed, I stopped counting the days until Samantha returned. Not because I cared less, but because I trusted more. I trusted that what we had built was not dependent on being in the same place every moment. I trusted that two people could continue growing while still being connected. One night, Samantha sent me a photograph of the ocean at sunset. On the back of the image, she wrote, "Some waves travel far before they reach the shore, but they always carry something back with them." I held that photograph for a long time because I finally understood what Samantha had been trying to teach me. Love was not about stopping someone from leaving. It was about believing that what truly matters can survive the distance. I used to think the ocean was a reminder of everything that separated Samantha and me, but over time, I began to see it differently. The ocean was not a barrier. It was a connection. It carried stories from one shore to another, just like the memories that continued to connect us while we were apart. Months had passed since Samantha left for her photography project, and my life had changed in ways I never expected. The cafe was busier than ever, not because I had changed the place completely, but because I had finally allowed myself to share it with others. People came not only for coffee, but for conversations, creativity, and the feeling of belonging. Samantha had always believed that every place had a story. Now I understood that every person did too. One afternoon, while organizing new artwork for the cafe, I received a package from Samantha. Inside was a collection of photographs and a handwritten letter. I sat near the window, overlooking the ocean, and read her words slowly. She wrote about the places she visited, but she also wrote about the things she had learned about herself. She admitted that traveling had once been her way of avoiding difficult emotions. She believed that if she kept moving, she would never have to face the things she left behind. But now she understood that running from feelings did not make them disappear. It only delayed the moment when you had to understand them. Her words made me think about my own journey. I had always believed Samantha was the one who needed to change, but I realized I had changed too. I had spent years protecting myself from disappointment by avoiding anything uncertain. Samantha taught me that a predictable life was not always the same as a fulfilling life. That evening, I called her. We talked for hours, just like we used to. But this conversation felt different. There was no fear underneath our words. There was no need to pretend. Everything was
fine.
We simply shared where we were in our lives. Do you ever regret leaving? I finally asked. Samantha became quiet for a moment. I regret that I left without being honest with you, she said. But I do not regret becoming the person I needed to become. I smiled because I understood. Sometimes people need space to discover themselves. Sometimes distance is not the end of a story. It is the chapter where people learn what they truly value. Before we ended the call, Samantha said something that stayed with me. When I come back, I do not want us to return to who we were before. I looked toward the ocean. What do you want instead? She answered softly. I want to meet who we have become. Her words gave me a feeling I had not experienced in a long time. Hope. Not the kind of hope that depends on everything being perfect. The kind of hope that comes from knowing two people can grow separately and still choose each other. That night, as the waves moved beneath the moonlight, I realized something important. The distance between Samantha and me had not been empty. It had been filled with growth, understanding, and the lessons we needed before finding our way back. I thought I understood what it meant to wait for someone, but I learned that true connection is not measured by time. It is measured by how two people continue to choose each other, even when life places miles between them. As the months passed, Samantha's return became something I looked forward to, but I also realized I was no longer waiting for my life to begin again. I was already living it. The cafe had become more than a place where I worked. It had become a place where people shared stories, where strangers became familiar faces, and where I discovered a version of myself I had forgotten existed. One morning, while preparing coffee for customers, I noticed a familiar feeling. Years ago, I would have thought happiness depended on having everything exactly as I wanted. Now I understood that happiness came from appreciating what was already meaningful. Samantha had changed the way I saw the world, even from a distance. One afternoon, I received a message from her saying that her project was almost finished and she would be returning soon. I read the message several times before replying. Not because I did not know what to say, but because I realized something important. I was not afraid of losing her anymore. I was afraid of pretending that nothing had changed. When Samantha came back, would we still have the same connection? Would the person she became still understand the person I had become? Those questions stayed with me. The day before her return, I walked along the beach, where we had spent so many hours talking. The shoreline looked exactly the same, but I knew I was different. I remembered the woman I had been before Samantha returned. Someone who believed that protecting herself meant avoiding uncertainty. Someone who thought a quiet life was the only way to feel safe. But I was not that person anymore. Samantha had reminded me that life was not about avoiding change. It was about discovering what change could bring. When Samantha finally arrived back in town, I saw her walking toward the cafe with her camera bag over her shoulder. For a moment, neither of us moved. We simply looked at each other, recognizing that we were meeting again as different people. Then she smiled. "You look happy," she said. I smiled back. "So do you." And it was true. Samantha looked more peaceful than before. The woman who once carried the weight of needing to find herself had returned with a sense of confidence and calm. We spent the afternoon talking about everything we had experienced. She showed me photographs from her journey, and I told her about the changes at the cafe. We laughed about old memories and discovered new ones. But there was one thing we both knew. We could not simply return to the past. The past was important, but it was not where we belonged anymore. That evening, as we stood near the ocean, Samantha looked at the waves and said, "I used to think coming back meant going backward." I looked at her. "And now?" She smiled. "Now I think coming back can mean moving forward." Hearing those words, I realized the distance between us had finally changed. It was no longer something separating two people. It was the journey that helped us understand why we wanted to be together in the first place. After Samantha came back, I expected everything to feel familiar, but I quickly realized that returning was not the same as going back. The town looked the same. The ocean sounded the same. The cafe still carried the same warm scent of coffee and the same peaceful atmosphere. But Samantha and I were no longer the same two people who had once said goodbye. We had both changed, and that change became the foundation of something new. In the weeks that followed, We started creating a new rhythm together. Samantha helped me organize photography events at the cafe, while I helped her find ways to share her work with the local community. It felt natural, almost as if our lives had always been moving toward this moment. But unlike before, we were not assuming we knew what the other person needed. We were listening. We were asking questions. We were allowing each other to be honest. One evening, Samantha and I sat near the shoreline after closing the cafe. She showed me a photograph she had taken during her journey. It was an image of waves meeting the sand under a quiet evening sky. "Why this picture?" I asked. She looked at it for a moment before answering. "Because it reminded me that some things are beautiful because they keep moving." I smiled. "You're talking about the ocean." Samantha looked at me and smiled too. "Maybe. Maybe not." Her answer made me laugh, but it also made me think. For years, we had both been afraid of change. Samantha feared that staying would mean losing herself. I feared that loving someone would mean losing my sense of security. But now we were learning that love did not require either of us to become smaller. It gave us space to become more. As our relationship grew, we also discovered that rebuilding trust was not about forgetting the past. It was about understanding it. There were still moments when old fears appeared. There were still conversations that required patience. But instead of avoiding those difficult feelings, we faced them together. One afternoon, Samantha asked me if I ever regretted waiting for her. I thought about the question carefully. Years ago, I might have answered differently. I might have said that I regretted the time we lost. But now I saw things another way. "I do not regret the years we spent apart," I said, "because those years made us understand who we are." Samantha looked at me quietly. "You really believe that?" I nodded.
Yes.
"Because if we had found each other again, without changing, we might have repeated the same mistakes." She smiled because she knew it was true. The past had taught us something important. Love was not about returning to an old version of a relationship. It was about creating something stronger with the people we had become. As the seasons changed, the cafe became a place where our worlds connected. Customers came to enjoy coffee, art, and stories from Samantha's travels. I watched her talk about photography with confidence, and I realized how much she had grown. She was no longer someone searching for where she belonged. She had finally discovered that home was not only a place. Sometimes, home was a person who allowed you to be completely yourself. I used to believe that the strongest connections were the ones that never changed, but Samantha taught me something different. The strongest connections are the ones that can change, grow, and still find their way back to each other. As time passed, our lives became a balance between shared moments and individual dreams. We were no longer trying to prove that we belonged together. We were simply choosing to be together. That difference changed everything. The cafe continued to grow, and Samantha's photography became more connected to the community. People who visited the cafe would often stop to admire her photographs and ask about the stories behind them. Samantha loved explaining the moments she captured, but what I noticed most was how comfortable she had become sharing herself with others. The woman who once protected her feelings behind distance was now allowing people to see her heart. One afternoon, a customer asked Samantha why she always photographed the ocean. She smiled and looked toward the window, where the waves could be seen in the distance. "Because the ocean reminds me that movement does not mean you are lost," she said. "Sometimes you have to travel far to understand where you truly belong." I listened to her answer and realized how much meaning those words carried. Samantha was not only talking about the ocean. She was talking about her own journey. Later that evening, after the cafe closed, we walked along the shoreline together. The sky was painted with soft colors from the setting sun, and the town was becoming quiet. Samantha stopped and looked at me. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I never came back?" she asked. I considered the question. The old version of me might have focused on everything we lost, the years apart, the conversations we never had, the moments we missed. But the person I had become saw things differently. Sometimes, I admitted. But I also think about everything we learned because of it. Samantha smiled gently. "You always find a way to see the good in things." I laughed softly. "Maybe I learned that from you." We continued walking, and I thought about how different this moment was from the past. Years ago, we were two people who cared deeply, but did not know how to communicate. We allowed fear to speak louder than honesty. We let distance become bigger than the connection between us. But now we understood something important. Love was not only about the moments when everything felt easy. It was also about the patience, understanding, and willingness to keep choosing each other through change. A few weeks later, Samantha showed me a new photography collection she was creating. The theme was simple. It was about places that feel like home. As I looked through the images, I noticed something familiar. Many of the photographs were not about famous locations or beautiful landscapes. They were about small moments. A shared conversation. A quiet morning. A person standing beside someone they trusted. "These are beautiful," I told her. Samantha smiled. I finally learned what I was looking for. I looked at her. What was that? She looked toward the ocean and answered softly, "A place where I could be myself." At that moment, I understood that we had both found what we had been searching for. Not a perfect life. Not a life without uncertainty, but a life filled with honesty, growth, and someone who made the journey worth taking. I once believed that finding someone meant finally reaching the end of a difficult journey, but Samantha helped me understand something much deeper. Finding someone is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning of learning how to walk beside them. Over time, our relationship became less about the years we lost and more about the moments we were creating together. We stopped looking back with sadness and started looking forward with gratitude. The cafe became a reflection of everything we had learned. The walls were filled with photographs, artwork, and stories from people in our community. Every corner carried a reminder that life was made from small moments that deserved to be noticed. Samantha often said that the best stories were not always the biggest ones. They were the quiet moments that showed who people truly were. One evening, we hosted an event at the cafe featuring Samantha's latest photography collection. The theme was about connections between people and places. As guests walked through the displays, I watched Samantha explain her photographs with confidence and warmth. I remembered the woman who had once struggled to share her feelings, and I felt proud of how far she had come. After everyone left, Samantha and I stood near the window, looking out at the ocean. The same waves that had witnessed our goodbye years ago were now watching a completely different chapter of our lives. "Do you ever think about how different everything could have been?" Samantha asked. I smiled. Of course. I think everyone wonders about the paths they did not take. She nodded. I used to think the choices we made separated us. I looked at her. And now? Samantha looked toward the water. Now I think those choices helped us become the people we needed to be. Her words stayed with me, because they were true. If Samantha had never left, maybe she would have always wondered what she could have become. If I had never faced the uncertainty of loving someone who followed her dreams, maybe I would have stayed afraid of change forever. We both needed that time apart. Not because we did not care about each other, but because we needed to understand ourselves first. Later that night, we walked along the beach, talking about the future. Not a perfect future. Not one without challenges. A real future. One where we supported each other's dreams while creating something meaningful together. Samantha told me she wanted to continue photographing coastal communities, but she also wanted to build a permanent home in the town where everything began. I smiled because I knew exactly what she meant. Home was no longer a place she needed to search for. She had finally found it. As we watched the waves move beneath the moonlight, I thought about everything that brought us to that moment. The distance. The unanswered questions. The years we spent apart. None of it disappeared. It became part of our story. And maybe that was the most beautiful part. The things that once felt like they were keeping us apart became the very things that helped us understand each other better. The ocean had carried Samantha away once, but it also guided her back. And this time, we were not trying to hold on to the past. We were choosing to create something new together. For so long, I believed that the most important moments in life were the ones that changed everything instantly. But looking back now, I realize that the most meaningful changes happened quietly, one small moment at a time. Samantha, And I did not rebuild our connection through one perfect conversation or one unforgettable day. We rebuilt it through patience, honesty, and the choice to keep showing up for each other. Years ago, the ocean carried Samantha away from my life. At the time, I thought it was the end of our story. I thought some connections were only meant to exist for a certain chapter before becoming memories. But life has a way of surprising us. Sometimes, the people who leave are not gone forever. Sometimes, they return when both people are finally ready to understand what they could not see before. Our life together was not exactly what I imagined years ago. It was better because it was real.
There were still challenges.
There were still moments when we had to communicate, compromise, and remember that love was not about perfection. It was about choosing each other while continuing to grow as individuals. Samantha continued her photography, capturing stories from coastal communities and sharing the beauty she found in everyday moments. I continued running the cafe, creating a place where people felt welcomed and connected. Our dreams were not identical, but they complemented each other. We learned that two people did not need to follow the same path to walk in the same direction. One evening, we returned to the lighthouse where we had once talked about the future years before. The view was exactly as beautiful as I remembered. The waves moved gently below us, and the sunset painted the sky with warm colors. Samantha stood beside me, holding her camera, but this time she was not searching for something she had lost. She was simply appreciating where she was. "Do you remember when we sat here before?" she asked. I smiled. "I remember. I thought I had to travel the world to find myself," she said. "But I learned that finding yourself is not about leaving everything behind. It is about understanding what you want to carry with you." I looked at the ocean and thought about everything we had experienced. The distance, the uncertainty, the years when we wondered if we would ever understand each other again. Those moments were not mistakes. They were part of the journey that brought us here. "I used to think the ocean was the thing between us," I said. Samantha smiled. "And now?" I looked at her and answered honestly. "Now I think it was the thing that connected us." We stood there together, listening to the waves that had witnessed every chapter of our story. The goodbye, the waiting, the return, the beginning of something new. I finally understood that some people are not meant to complete us. They are meant to inspire us to become more complete versions of ourselves. Samantha did not come back to save me. I did not need saving. I did not return to her because I was missing a piece of myself. I chose her because my life was already whole, and sharing it with her made it even more meaningful. The ocean continued moving, just as it always had. Waves came and went, traveling across great distances before reaching the shore again. And maybe that was the lesson we both needed to learn. Some things are worth waiting for. Some connections are strong enough to survive distance. And some stories are not finished when people say goodbye. Sometimes, they are only waiting for the right moment to begin again.